Hello everybody and welcome back to Witch's Castle. I am Will Castle, and today we are not actually talking about a deck tech. We're going to have a bit of a discussion today. But before we get too much further into the video, if I could go ahead and pester you to sneak on down and click the subscribe button. Basically so I can keep throwing videos like this at you. Pester your brain with information about little pieces of cardboard. I'd appreciate it a lot. If you could click the little like button down below. This is purely for my ego. I need it. We all do. Everybody needs an ego boost right now. That's just the state of the world. And there's a bell. You can ring the bell to get notified every time the video drops the channel drops new videos. And without further ado, let's get into it. So today's video topic, I wanted to do something a little different, because I've been putting together a lot of deck techs recently that have had some scarier commanders. I put together that Toxrill. I put together Celeste from Final Fantasy as kind of a combo-y commander. So today, I want to take an opportunity to sit down and share my thoughts and opinions on the concept of remove on-site commanders. Basically, if you haven't been playing Commander for very long, there's an idea that floats around in the community that there are some commanders that are so potent, so powerful, and so broken that they need to be removed on site. You basically should never let them stick around on the table for any extended period of time. And I'm here to kind of challenge that mentality today, because I feel like it's less an issue of the fact that the cards are powerful and more an issue of potentially communication and or understanding deck building as a whole, both for the person building said remove on-site commander and for the people playing against them. So I've got a list of a few commanders on here that people generally consider to be remove on-site or fall into kind of a weird category where it's one of multiple commanders that could be removed on-site when we get into some of the other creature types. I've also got some other cards in here as potential options that people could run in their decks that take up a little less mind space, so to speak. When people are building their decks, you want to include cards that synergize with your deck but are also good. So I tried to put together some cards here in this list that synergize with specific strategies that people are commonly playing that you might be able to slot in if you're having issues dealing with some of these types of commanders. So we're going to talk about a few of those commanders right now, and we're going to start with Najeela the Blade Blossom. This card came out back in Battle Bond. It's 2 and a red for a 3/2 human warrior. She says, whenever a warrior attacks, you may have its controller create a 1/1 white warrior creature token that's tapped and attacking. You can pay a white, a blue, a black, a red, and a green, and untap all attacking creatures. They gain trample, lifelink, and haste until end of turn. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. Activate this ability only during combat. So this commander gained the reputation of being remove on site both for the static ability, whenever a warrior attacks, make another attacking warrior generically, is just super good. It doesn't say non-token warrior, and notably, it doesn't say a warrior you control. It says warrior period. We'll get into that in a second. And then obviously there's combo potential. Najeela has been a CEDH commander for a long time, was one of the reigning CEDH best decks for a solid period of time. It's a 5-color commander that only costs 3 mana. That's pretty good. The combat shenanigans are really solid, and overall it's just kind of fun. If you like big beatdown attacky kind of strategies, Najeela is a lot of fun to play. But it makes for very quick games at casual tables if you end up playing it as a casual deck. So people have kind of looked at this as one of the potential commanders you would remove on site if you see it. Combo potential, value potential of board. It's got a lot of scary words, and I'm certainly not trying to disagree with anybody on the internet that cards like this are not broken. They certainly are. They are very broken. This card is absurd. There's a reason why it's saw as much play in CEDH as it did, and still probably does. Maybe a little less so now that Dockside's gone, and Jeweled Lotus being gone for sure hurts this deck a lot. But overall, generically powerful commander. you really want to get a feel for the person you're playing with and the people you're playing with before you decide whether or not a commander is going to be a remove on site pick for you, I feel. That's what the Rule Zero conversation is supposed to be for. Anybody who's unfamiliar, the Rule Zero conversation is a concept for commander, specifically saying, hey, when you sit down to play a game with folks in commander, have a chat about what kind of game you're looking to have, because there's more people in that game. In a one-on-one game, we're both there to try and beat each other. That's it. We've mutually agreed, and we can have a good time. With multiple people, they could each have different intents of what they want to do with that game and what they're hoping to achieve out of it. So the idea of the Rule Zero conversation is exactly to prevent any friction from happening. You sit down before your game with the people you're playing with and chat about it to make sure it goes the way you want it to. There's so many extra bodies. I say so many. It's only 2. But there's enough extra bodies that extra layer of communication is necessary in order to make sure that you're getting the most enjoyable experience out of your game and also learning the most about it. Najeela is very potent and scary, but also because of the flexibility and the potency and the scariness of it, if you are a player sitting at a table and recognize that one of these remove on site commanders sits down, you can choose to leverage potentially trying to make deals with that person if you know your deck is not quite up to where theirs is going to be. Instead of being one of the masses choosing to remove over and over again a commander you perceive as potentially being too problematic, attempt to make allyships and then get down to that one-on-one game where you and that person can now both agree, all right, we're the last 2 in the game, let's slug it out and see what happens. And you'll find that as a person who plays with the intent of removing commanders on site, and as a person who plays with a commander that gets removed on site, your removal magically disappears when you're trying to get rid of all of the other stuff in their deck. Something like Toxrill here, I built the deck tech for recently. Toxrill is really potent and powerful as a commander, and it causes a lot of rage. However, the deck that goes with Toxrill is often more problematic than the actual commander, but people will spend all of their time and resources removing that commander over and over again because they see that as the threat. Now, you as the person who wants to remove that commander over and over again realize, oh, I used 3 pieces of removal on that slug, and now they're dropping Razaketh because it was a reanimator deck the whole time. They're open-ended, so that makes them scary, but that also means that the decks themselves are going to be inherently loaded with potentially more juice if you're actually that concerned about removing it on site. The other juice in the deck's going to get you just as bad. So making sure that you have ways to get around a deck strategy instead of the actual card will be more beneficial in the long run. Yeah, I could sit here and worry and spend all my time trying to keep Toxrill from hitting the board and removing it all the time. But there's an Elves player at the table, and I can't beat Elves. I'm playing equipment. Can't beat Elves. But I can stick a bunch of equipment on one creature and make it big enough that the slime counters don't immediately kill it and give me some value. So the mindset needs to shift a little bit in terms of how people are interacting with these commanders. We've got a couple more on this list. I've got Urza and Elishnorn as 2, and Krenko Mob Boss as 3 monocolor commanders that people generally consider as remove on site for very different reasons. Krenko's remove on site because it can create a mass board of a bunch of little dudes. Problematic. Krenko always gets out of hand. I've not seen a Krenko deck that doesn't do something absurdly stupid, even if they only spent $5 to build the deck. Krenko's kind of got some wiggle room in my brain. I've got a special place in my rage-filled heart for Krenko. He's like one of my only little exceptions. But even then, it's less an exception and more a... As a player, pay attention when Krenko's at the table. but let the other people do the panicking, and if they're not panicking, be the one. You don't want to pile on in the remove on-site commander world for the worry of feels bads. Like, I don't care whether or not you as a person like the color blue in Magic the Gathering. That does not give anybody any excuse to bully, berate, or belittle somebody out of a game just because you do not like the specific way they want to play that game. Basically, that's the crux of this video. I do not like the concept of remove on-site commanders because it's our community further encouraging each other to just be rude and nasty to each other instead of communicating. There was all this mad hype and rage about the bans that came out a few months ago with Dockside and Jewel Lotus. If that conversation had been happening more consistently, and if our community had chosen to start paying attention a little more to actually strategizing with these new pieces that we have, instead of mass complaining because we won't talk to each other, we wouldn't have lost some of those cards, frankly. Nadu, different world. Literally, broken cards that get banned obviously fall in the category of remove on site, but they're banned, so you don't have to worry about that. And I also want to make a clear point that I'm not saying that you should have to put up with overpowered commanders. You should be allowed, and more people should actively making the effort to leave if there's a commander they don't want to interact with, or as the person bringing a commander that somebody doesn't want to interact with, being conscious that people maybe don't want to interact with it and being willing to look for a pod that it's more suited in. But yeah, Krenko lives in a special place in my heart for murder immediately. I despise Krenko thoroughly in my soul. But also I will let Krenko live a little bit if it means causing somebody else at the table to panic, because it means I get to save my removal for when I want to deal with it. That's the bottom line, is multiple people wasting their resources to deal with one problem means that somebody else at the table, who was obviously a bigger problem, wins, and it's all feel-bads. Lock the remove on site idea for commanders specifically out of your head. They built an entire deck around that card and wanting to use that card, purposefully making it so they can't, unless that person playing that card is also a trash human, is kind of a rude thing to do and will lead to feel-bads in games. So then I've got a few of these kind of more value-centric commanders to talk about. Joda, Winota, and Animar. And also Sauron. These four are highly synergistic commanders, and therefore it causes them to be remove on site. It's less that they do something that actively makes it a nightmare for you. Yeah, Sauron makes an orc army when you cast spells, and it makes it bigger. But it doesn't hurt you immediately, and it is just a little dude. I have to find a way to get in with that, so it doesn't feel as bad. Joda feels pretty bad. It gives legendary creatures +X/+X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. And then when you recast a legendary spell from your hand, you basically get Cascade for legendaries, which is just absurd. There are so many random legendary spells now that are so ridiculously cheap, it's not even funny. We just got Ether Drift that had that full cycle of, I think they're commons or uncommons, that are just legendary creatures that are big with decent mana costs and no other text. I mean, I'll pay 3 mana for a random legendary that can cascade me into, I don't know, literally any 2-cost legendary. Friggin' 5-color deck, Kinnan. Yeah, I'll cast this 2-color cards, or 3-cost legend to go get that. That's insane. And legends are inherently powerful because most of them are open-ended and or buffed in a way that they can either be used as a commander or often are used as sub-pieces of strategies. So it's very open-ended. There's a lot of wiggle room you can do with it. But truthfully, Ghostly Prison is a really good card. And that +X/+X really does not hurt as much if you Ghostly Prison. and don't have to deal with them attacking you as much. And Ghostly Prison's just a blanketly good card that can go into pretty much any white deck. Slivers are a different kind of interesting in this category, because the Grave Mother itself is not necessarily the remove on sight commander, but slivers have garnered the reputation as the remove on sight creature type, because they're kind of obnoxious once there's more than like 3 of them in play. But the commanders themselves I rarely find to be the only issue. There's certainly an issue, but by the time a sliver commander usually comes out, there's already 3 or 4 slivers that are out that are already making my life a nightmare. So sliver commanders go on the list of, I know I want to kill it, but I just won't, because if I kill that, they'll play 4 other slivers that have much scarier words on them. That's the truth of it. Most of the sliver commanders themselves have good, perfectly average, fair text on them, in context to pretty much any other creature type, with 1 or 2 exceptions. The sliver that gives them Cascade obviously would be broken, period. But most of these other ones, the Encore is good, but elves would just get a couple of mana dorks and that would be fairly reasonable. Goblins, I can't imagine wanting to Encore too many goblins, except for Krenko, because it can make more goblins. But yeah, the sliver commanders themselves, for the most part, have abilities that are not remarkable for any reason other than the fact that they also say sliver on them. And that's just true of slivers. So sliver commanders, not remove on sight for me. Sliver decks, I gotta kind of be careful about which ones do, like they get out of hand so absurdly quickly. I'm not hyper targeting the sliver player because I know that means they'll just kill me. But I'm certainly gonna look for very specific slivers that interact with my strategies bad. If I'm playing a deck that has a lot of flying, they can have their flying slivers, but I don't necessarily want them to have menace. You know, that kind of thing. Paying attention to threat prioritization of what's actually in the deck versus the one thing you know is in the deck and can be played repeatedly. If I know people are just going to remove commanders on site, there's not a whole lot stopping me from purposefully building a deck that's just gross and then picking a remove on site commander just because I know that people will choose to hyper target that. It's letting too many people fall into poor behaviors and poor strategy, both as the player of the commander and playing against the commander. Too much removal and interaction is wasted on commanders, only to lose to the deck still anyway, because they have all the gas in the actual deck. So, enough rambling about the commanders themselves. I'm going to go over some of the cards that I had picked to kind of give some people some ideas as to some options they might have. I'm going to go over a couple sorceries here super quick. I have Displacement Wave. It's X blue, and it says return all non-land permanents with converted mana cost X or less to their owner's hands. If you don't like dealing with token commanders, if token commanders are the remove on site commander for you, 2 mana blow up all of their tokens. There are a bunch of other cards that say, like Maelstrom Pulse, you blow up a creature and then everything that has the same name as it is good for tokens. But this has much more flexibility in it, in that it's all non-land permanents. It can be used to help you if you want to recast those spells, and you can kind of fluctuate what the converted mana cost is that you want to bounce. So, Displacement Wave on 0 gets rid of all the tokens. Displacement Wave on like 3 bounces some of your better ETB creatures back into your hand as well. It's a really solid piece. It's also a budget option, because obviously Cyclonic Rift would be the card that goes here. If everybody could get their hands on a Cyclonic Rift and play it in every deck that they could, you'd never have to worry about remove on-site commanders again, because people would just board wipe. That's the truth of it. You don't need to remove on-site the commander when you can board wipe. It's a waste of resources to take the time and effort to pinpoint removal at people's commanders when you already put board wipes in your deck for that reason, basically. That's the one card they can choose to recast over and over again, and you don't always get to recast your removal. Better to do this kind of thing. Ravenform. Ravenform is in here. There's another card that's on this list that's similar. It's a blue card. It's 2 and a blue. It's a sorcery, and it says exile target artifact or creature. Its controller makes a 1/1 blue bird creature token with fly, and it has foretell. I've talked about this card a little bit before in a couple of my deck techs. I like the foretell. I generally think this card's pretty good, and especially if you find yourself in situations where you feel like you're dealing with a lot of remove on-site commanders, being able to exile things is really good. That's why Swords and Path get played. But if you're in blue and not white, you need access to something that will be able to exile certain things. And this being able to get rid of a creature or an artifact as a blue card, super handy, super helpful. I like it a lot. Perplexing Test is another underrated one to me. 3 blue for an instant. Return all creature tokens to their owner's hands, or return all non-token creatures to their owner's hands. Same deal. If you're tired of dealing with token decks, done. But also, if you're a token deck and you're tired of other people somehow getting more things in play than you, done. And it's instant speed. Very helpful. Keeps you from getting murdered immediately. Gives you some potential wiggle room to respond in some of those situations where somebody's trying to maybe go infinite with some of the stuff they have in play. It'd be easier and better for you to be able to just say, screw it, bounce everything, let's try this again. These are all various stacks pieces that I picked specifically because they either were innately good enough that it didn't bug me that they would take up a slot in a deck that doesn't necessarily care about stacks, or they provide an extra advantage in addition to being a stacks piece. So the extra advantage pieces are something like Karn's Silex. It's a 3-cost legendary artifact, enters tapped. Players can't pay life to cast spells or activate abilities that are not mana abilities. A lot of commanders up top that we looked at have activated abilities, no longer can be used. Paying life is a huge deal for most black decks, period. No longer can be used. Groovy. You can also pay X and exile Karn's Silex to destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X or less, only as a sorcery. It's a stacks piece with a board wipe built into it, so if you're an artifact-centric deck and you're dealing with a lot of those commanders that would normally be remove on site, this is kind of a piece that you can play that might help make their strategy less potent and give you the way to deal with the board presence once it's established. That's the big deal that I'm trying to get across here, is encouraging people to go after the strategies and the synergies in a deck instead of the immediate leader of the deck. Because if you're like me, you pick commanders sometimes because they just look cool, and it feels bad to get hated out of a game because I just wanted the guy to look cool. Pieces like this, at least I get to play my commander. The deck might not do anything, but I got to play the card I came here to play, so I'm chill personally. I won't speak for everybody that's that way, but I certainly do not mind if I'm playing a deck that's spicier, that people play pieces that help undermine my strategy, but not necessarily my commander itself. I've got Weathered Runestone and Vexing Bauble in here. These are kind of no, you can't do that style cards. Vexing Bauble is a 1-cost artifact. It says whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell, and then you can sacrifice it to draw a card. If you're tired of dealing with cascading decks and want a very low cost of include card, Vexing Bauble's great, because it even replaces itself for you. I've also got 2 of these creatures can't attack style effects in the artifact section. It's Crawl Space and Ensnaring Bridge. Crawl Space is 3, and it says no more than 2 creatures can attack you each combat. Some of these commanders get around that a little bit because of the wording, but if you're worried about something like Joda, where they're actually playing a bunch of creatures and then sending them, it does better for you. If you're worried about something like Kranko, where they make the creatures then attack, this works for you. Something like Najeela minimizes how much can be immediately sent at you, but it doesn't minimize the fact that there will be extra bodies coming anyway, because Najeela's trigger will make that creature attacking after you've already gone into the step, so it subverts the crawl space rules. I also like Damping Matrix. Activated abilities of artifacts and creatures can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. You can still make mana. I'm not here to stop you from literally doing what you need to play the game. Just stop doing those crazy, ridiculous effects that are making it harder for me to play the game. Down in the enchantment section, we have more of the players can't and or get rid of style effects. Ashes of the Abhorrent is 1 and a white for an enchantment. Players can't cast spells from graveyards or activate abilities of cards in graveyards, and whenever a creature dies, you gain 1 life. So this one's on here because of the same kind of Leyline of the Void text, but it's also on here because of the whenever a creature dies, you gain a life text. That's not particularly overly powerful. I just picked it for decks that specifically synergize and care about life gain as a mechanic and or aristocracy styles strategies. Ghostly Prison, Propaganda. I also threw in Smoke because it's not quite the same, but it functionally does similar. These are 3 cards that either make it harder for people to attack us or to untap their stuff. Smoke's a great one. Each player can only untap 1 creature during his or her untap phase. If you're running a Voltron... So then I've got some creatures, some regular, generic, boring friggin' creatures. They're not boring. But these are some creature options that you have to play in decks that might be able to give you an idea as to how to mitigate some of the issues you're dealing with. Archivist of Ogma. If their deck involves a lot of searching, tutors, that kind of thing, this will give you some card draw and some life advantage. There are other options, things like Aven Mind Sensor stop them from doing that. Ashiok Dream Render stops them from tutoring. This just gives us a little extra advantage, and I kind of prefer that if I feel like I'm behind. I'd rather not stop them and more catch up with them. It takes more effort to stop than it does to keep going, basically. Doorkeeper Thrall, Hushbringer, and Tocatli Honor Guard are 3 creatures that say ETBs don't happen. Atraxa that has the draw a bunch of cards, basically, ETB? No. And admittedly, Tocatli is not as free of an include, but Hushbringer, Flying, and Lifelink is a pretty solid include. Any flying-based decks, any fairies decks, that kind of thing. Doorkeeper Thrall also hits artifacts, and it has flash. Great blocker. If somebody is going to play something that you immediately know is a problem, this can almost function as kind of a pseudo counterspell for you in white, so I like it a lot. Maglehorn is just a really good green card. Blowing up an artifact and making all artifacts that your opponents control enter tapped is really, really good. If you're a green deck, consider picking up a copy of this for your deck just because it's good and generic and playable. Consider it in a piece of your deck as a removal spell and less as a synergy piece or as a creature, basically. Like, it's gonna do creature-related work, but I'm not playing it in the deck because my brain goes, oh, it synergizes with all my creature stuff. I'm playing it in the deck because my brain goes, oh, it stops their stuff. And then Soulless Jailer, it's another artifact that's also a creature, so it's got a low cost of inclusion and it prevents players from doing graveyard shenanigans. So to me, Remove On Sight only applies realistically for regular cards in a deck, because some cards just need to be for the sake of the game, and for competitive environments. For the CEDH environment, duh. There are certain commanders you literally have to remove because you're there to literally play competitively. That's the goal. But for casual games, it needs to be a discussion. People should not be believing that remove on-site commanders exist because the Rule 0 conversation exists. A strategy as a concept exists. You can learn to adapt your strategies around these cards instead of making the caveman response of just beat it with a stick until it's gone, because you're still losing those games. The games where you go, aha, I'm so glad I spent the whole game hyper-targeting that guy out of it, you're probably not winning nearly as much. Statistically, it's unlikely that you're winning as much, and if you are, you're playing with the wrong people, frankly. If you're winning that much and feel unchallenged by that kind of thing, you're playing either with the wrong people or they do not have the resources that you have, and you either need to move to a new group or help them figure out how to work with it. As somebody who often plays commanders that are powerful, potent, and remove on sight style commanders, I make an active effort at the tables that I sit down at to either say, okay, yeah, this is one of those scary commanders. You'll probably want to deal with it because this is what it does. Here are the pieces to look for. Or say, yeah, guys, it's one of those scary commanders, but it's actually just a really stupid gimmick. So you see what it does and then decide if you want to kill me, I guess. That was it for the video today, guys. I know it's a little bit different than what I've been doing. It's more me just generally yapping about Magic stuff. But truthfully, the channel is doing very well. We've been getting a lot of consistent growth thanks to all the interaction from all of you guys. The ability to start branching out into the content has been widening. I'm sitting down doing this video right now because I have the availability to do so a little bit more. And there's going to be more content coming in the future. I've said that a couple times, and I'm going to use this video as an opportunity to sit down and kind of chat a little bit about some of those implications. Starting off with what kind of content to look forward to going forward. I'm working on getting a camera set up to try and do a gameplay series for people so they can see some of these decks actually in action, or some of my other decks personally in action, some of my friends' decks. I'm also a big video games person. I really like playing games like Destiny, and I've been playing a lot of Need for Speed Heat recently. So I have the idea to put more video game content on the channel as well. Part of what I want to do is start doing a series of Destiny gameplay videos that are commentary-less. You're not there because you're listening to me sit there and talk about the game the whole time. Because truthfully, while I enjoy the game a lot, my opinions are not necessarily super insightful on it. So I would rather provide something like commentary-less gameplay footage so that people can just put it on the background and have something playing while they're doing whatever. We are the generation, we are moving into the generation of people that just have random videos playing on in the background while they do something, falling asleep, whatever. And no commentary gameplay videos let me show you guys what I like to do in that game without worrying as much about giving you insightful commentary. It'll just be something that you can put on in the background, see and kind of get a feel for the vibe of certain games, and also gives me a chance to show people what I work on in that game. Destiny 2 has a lot of build crafting itself, so I like fidgeting with it for that reason. That's why it feels kind of Magic tangential to me, is because of the build crafting in that game itself. So I want to start bringing some of that content in. Some of the other content with me gaming with my friends will start being worked into the channel a little bit more as we start to progress and as the audience starts to grow. So thank you guys all so much for sitting down here and listening to what I have to say about anything, truthfully. There's a lot of content out there, and you could be listening to pretty much anybody. I really, really appreciate that you're listening to me. That's it. Anything else would be rambling. So thank you guys all so much. If you go ahead and click the subscribe button, obviously, you know I appreciate it. I can't think of any other words to say but the word appreciate, like every other YouTuber on this platform. And you're subscribed to those guys, so you might as well click the little button and subscribe to me. You can also click the like button for me. It gives me a good ego boost, helps boost the interaction for the page, the algorithm, and also, it's a thumbs up. It's cool. It's like Terminator, that one guy who went into the lava. I watched the movie. I'm not that young. Don't look at me like that. It's Terminator 2. I know. Believe me. The sound effects in that movie literally traumatized me a little bit as a kid. I know my movies. It was so loud, but it's so good. And now, I've made a Terminator 2 reference. So you have to ring the bell so that you know when the resistance is coming. Alright, guys. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!